Oh, yeah, you're right. Smoke. There you go. Just leave you. Ellie's in Savannah. Her son is Ellie's in Savannah. Her son is in.
Ah, there we go. Okay, now it's live. Beautiful. There we go. Keep the volume off, otherwise you'll get. Because it's on YouTube and it's on Zoom.
He's growing and need Starbucks.
We're working on here. I was gonna get one too. Got it. Some delicious oats. Coconut, thank you. Yeah. Wait, where is this?
So this is right next door to that. It used to be like a.
Oh yes, yeah. It's not too cold today. No way. You know what? Another reserve.
That.
I want to take it here.
Hello, morning. Do you usually start on Chabad time or on time? Which
Chabad time.
All right. All right, good morning. We're going to get started. You can take your seats. My name is Rabbi Edelman, taking over your next 3 classes. So don't be intimidated. Ask any questions, any challenges, refutations, throw some tomatoes, whatever you like. All right, so I want you to take a second and think of your favorite character from a TV show, from a book, your favorite fictional character. Think about what makes them your favorite. I'm willing to bet that the character that you have in mind is what writers call a 3-dimensional character, not a flat character. Flat characters are ones whose motivations are simple, straightforward, uncomplicated. They have essentially only one path in life. You can guess their next moves every single time because that's their personality. They are that type of person. And you'll see them a lot. You'll have the ditzy girl who's always the ditzy girl. No matter what she does, every single sentence is that exact personality. Those are rarely our favorite characters. Every single story will have them, but they're usually not the central character. Or if they are the central character, probably not going to like them that much. What we like are complex characters who you can't always guess their next step because they've got conflicting motivations. They're kind and cruel. They're a torturer who feels bad about what they're doing. They've got some sort of tension inside. Those are the characters that really resonate with us usually. Why is that? Why are those the characters that resonate with us? Well, part of it's because they surprise us. We can't just write the rest of the book ourselves. But another reason is because they resonate with us because that's who we are. We know people. People are not flat. We can't guess their next moves. As every economist knows, the only thing that's certain is that we can't tell what they're going to do next. So we connect with those characters because we can see the humanity within them, the sense of like there's more than just one plane in their thoughts. So if you looked on page 111 in your book, there's a little checklist over here. It's probably in lesson 4. You can take a copy here if you don't have one. It goes through a checklist and it asks the question. It says, I am a selfish person. Yes or no? I am not a selfish person. Yes or no? Some things, or at times, I really only care about myself and my well-being. Yes or no? If you read through, you'll see each of them have the yes or no options. If you took a second to look at that checklist, you might find yourself answering yes to a few opposite questions, or no to two of the same things. I am a selfish person and I'm not a selfish person. Depends when, depends to whom, depends the context, depends what side of the bed I woke up that morning. And that's the reality, is that most of us are complex. We have the yeses and the nos together. So what does that say about us? That we're just all hypocrites? And that what's going on inside of us, there's just constantly two thoughts? So the Alter Rebbe addresses this. He says that every person is in reality hypocritical because we are made of more than just one part. We're not just a single person who happens to have conflicting ideas going on. We're actually made up of multiple parts warring inside ourselves. These are called the two souls. So if you look at text 1, which is page 112, see in the first chapter of Tanya, which is the seminal work of Chabad mysticism, he lays out this essential principle that there are two souls within the person. Anyone want to read text 1 for us? Volunteers? Whose mouths are full?
I'll read.
Go for it.
I swallowed. The first of our souls originates in non-holiness. This soul resides in our bloodstream to vitalize our body. It is the source of all our negative character traits, as well as those positive traits that come naturally to us, such as compassion and kindness. A Jew's second soul is an actual part of a transcendent God.
Thank you. So those are the two souls. In Chassidus, they're called the Nefesh HaBehamis, the animal soul, and the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul. Those are the two souls within each person. And it's very important to not confuse these with good and evil, because they're not good and evil. They're animal and divine. So what does it mean to be animal? What separates the animal from the human, as we would say? Thinking, thought. So if you go to, you'll read some of the modern scientific works. Francis de Waal, they try to define the difference between human and animal, and it's usually in their minds just a matter of quantity. We feel the same emotions, we think the same things, we just think more. We have more neural pathways, and we have slightly more intense emotions, the ability to abstract thought a little more. And that's why you'll have many scientists who think that we are animals with opposable thumbs. We're just a slightly more developed form. But Hasidus views those as human and animal as drastically different. Kabbalah views them as separate worlds. So what is animal and what is human? Animal is looking down. Animal is looking only at what is required for me to survive. Everything is built into this idea of I need to exist, I need to survive. And within that framework, all of my decisions follow. And most of the time, we are that animal. We think in terms of what allows us to survive, what allows us to move on. And that's a lot of our decisions. A lot of our decisions are run by that. We eat because, of course, we eat. Why would we not eat? That's the animal inside. It's not evil per se. It's just self-centered. And it's important. The baby is born. The moment that they're born, they're often already looking at a nurse. And they're crying because they're hungry. They're not crying because someone else is hungry. They're crying because they're hungry. That's the animal soul. The animal soul arrives first. It's there from the moment of existence. It's important because otherwise we wouldn't know when they were hungry and they wouldn't grow. So animal souls are important, but they're not all of us. For the animals, that is all of them. All of them is the desire to live, the desire to reproduce, the desire to have pleasure. But humans have the ability to attain another level, which is the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul, which is to say, I'm going to view the world from a perspective outside of myself. I'm going to look from higher than myself. Zoom out, not look through my own eyes. And in Hasidus, in Kabbalah, that's the human element. The human element doesn't show up that often. Often we're just looking through the animal eyes. But we have the ability to zoom out for a second and say, actually, this life is part of something greater. That's the distinction. So sometimes the tension inside of us is between these two opposing views of there is only me and there is something above me, something greater than me. And we can feel both of those at the same time, pulling and pushing, in constant tension. And that's why in the checklist, you'll have, am I a selfish person or not a selfish person? Well, naturally, we all are selfish people. We're born that way. You'll see it. They did studies with children that if you have a group of children, 20 kids, and you start giving out candy to kids, and you give 2 to every single child and 1 to one child, most of the children will say, hey, that's not fair. That child also deserves 2. If you give 1 to every child and 2 to one child, everyone will say, hey, that's not fair. But the one who got 2 will say, no, it's perfectly fair. Because that's naturally how we are. We are naturally selfish, but we have the ability to look above and beyond that. So what's more powerful, though? Which of those 2 souls has more intense control? Now, what would you guess? Looking around at the life, the people that you see, which of those 2 souls has got more power?
Animals.
Yeah, the animal soul. If I would make this class in Buffalo at 9 a.m. in a snowstorm, how many people would show up? So we got one. There we go. If I would make a football game in Buffalo in a snowstorm at 9 a.m., how many people would show up? Tens of thousands. That's the way it works. We're willing to put ourselves above all sorts of discomforts, less willing to put the larger vision, over all sorts of discomforts. And that's important to understand, is that, naturally, the animal soul is more powerful. That's why we put out bagels and cream cheese at this class, because we understand the way to the Jewish mind is through the stomach. And that is always the case. And it's true for everybody. You have to talk to the animal soul if you want to get in, because the animal soul has control, has power, and we can fight it, but it has more power. It's the beast inside, and beasts are powerful. So if you look at text 2, this is a quote from Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the previous Rebbe, lived from 1880 to 1950. And he emphasized that this is important. So in text 2, any other volunteers who finished swallowing? Kick harder. Go for it. You read text 2 for me?
The ox's strength produces abundant crops. That is to say, the animal soul drive is more potent than the godly soul's drive.
Exactly. But this terminology is very important. The nefesh ha-behamis is the word behema in Hebrew. Behema is different than the word chaya in Hebrew, which both mean animal. But behema refers to an animal that can be domesticated, and chaya refers to a non-domesticated animal. We don't call it a nefesh ha-chayas, a wild animal soul. We call it a behema soul, a domesticated animal soul. Because if you take a bull, you take an ox, you say, hey, you like eating? All right, walk this way and I will give you some barley at the end. And you attach a yoke to them. Now that same thought process in their head, which is I want to eat, can be harnessed to tear up a field and allow you to plant. So the real goal here is to say we have an incredible power within us. The power to feel ourselves and to need to keep ourselves intact. It's an incredibly powerful drive. It's what allows an animal to chew off their own leg to survive. It's an incredibly powerful, push. And our job is to put a yoke on it somehow. If we have that, it will do a lot more than just the godly soul could by itself. You would be able to show up to a class like this on Buffalo during a snowstorm. If we could somehow attach that feeling to the animal soul, there's a lot more that we could do. So that's, in a general sense, a macro sense, our goal in life is to try to make our animal soul also work for us.
It's the vehicle.
Yeah. So how do you do that, though? How would you do that? Hard question. And I know the concept. I haven't done it all myself, but in concept, the idea is if I said to you, here, this is a cup, filling it with poison. I want you to drink it. You're not going to drink it. You're not going to drink it because you're naturally just not able to. To use an extreme example, people who are trying to end their own lives, they can't just hold their breath forever. It's not possible because our desire to live is so powerful. So what if I said, here, in order to survive, you need to do mitzvahs. It's part of what makes you alive. Without that, you just don't really live. Without helping someone else, your day is incomplete. The same way that if you didn't eat, you'd be hungry. If we could make that mind shift, that part of living is doing these positive things, then the same animal soul which says, I need to eat to survive, would also say, I need to go volunteer in a soup kitchen to survive. That same push, which would allow us to overcome incredible hardships, would allow us to overcome those same hardships to do good things. So what our goal is to say, these good things are not things that we do in addition to the rest of our life, but they are our life. And furthermore, if the purpose of life is those things, then every detail of your life can become part of that goal. So, I just drank some water. I did it so that I wouldn't be thirsty during the class so that I could teach properly. So the drinking of the water was part of the class. So if I said my goal in life when I wake up is to make 100 people happy today, if I'm hungry, I'm just not going to have the energy. So then when I'm eating, I'm not eating just for myself. I'm eating so that I can make people happy. And then that same animal soul which pushes me to eat can be harnessed to say that eating is part of a larger goal as well. And those are the two essential approaches to try to tame the animal, which is A, to identify good things with life, and B, to say life is about good things. And even the parts that aren't directly those good things are working towards that goal. And that's the animal soul in a nutshell, trying to tame the beast. So the question is, why is the animal soul so much stronger? We know that it is, but why? If I would ask you, what's stronger, a divine power or an animal power? You presume, the divine power, it sounds so incredible and powerful. So why isn't it stronger? Soul connected to God, and it's just not as strong as the soul that's animalistic and self-centered. Seems backwards. So we're going to have to look back to the history of the animal soul and try to see where did it come from? Where did this power come from? So in Kabbalah, the energy that comes from God, which we've discussed in previous classes, you've discussed in previous classes extensively, is made up of two general parts. It's called the oros and the kalim, the light and the vessels. Now, as you probably know, learning Kabbalah is a little bit like trying to explain color to a blind person. Because these are spiritual concepts, and our minds are very, very physical and physically oriented. And so whenever we say something, we just immediately think of physical concepts, when in reality, it's more of a spiritual concept. So with light and vessels, the words themselves are analogies. And we're going to try to give you as many analogies as possible so you can get some grasp of the concept. Light and vessels. So the analogy is given here. If you look at figure 4.1, I think, is imagine you have a book. In that book, there are two separate things going on at once. You have the letters, the words, and the ideas that those words are contained within. Those are two parts of the same. Without either of them, you don't have a book. Words with no ideas are a jumble. And ideas with no words are not a book. The same thing is true of a melody, which is you can have notes, but if they're not trying to convey anything, you don't really have a melody. You just have notes. When there's a melody which is trying to tell some sort of story within it, then you have a song. That's why my son does not make melodies, just makes notes. Because he just bangs. It's notes, but it's not a song. And there's a lot of things in life that have these two parts to them. And the same thing is true of the energy that comes from God. Energy that comes from God has the light and the vessel. So what does it mean to have the light and the vessel in the energy from God? So the word light here is used very specifically. The analogy of light is that if I turn on a flashlight and turn it off, what happens? The light is gone. Because light travels at incredible speeds, to the human eyes, it never exists apart from the source of it. You don't see light without seeing where it came from. It's just the reality. Now, if you had a photon, checker, you could actually do that. You could actually look at them. But for humans, light is always in a beam directly connected to where it comes from. So that's the analogy given. Energy that is always connected, always directly attached to its source. It always wants to connect to it. Take away the source, the light disappears. So when God gives energy, says, here's energy. That energy, the light form of energy, says, I am connected to God every moment. And I can feel my maker in me at every moment. And I always want to go back there. Being separate from the maker doesn't feel right. That's not an energy that can easily create a world. Because as soon as you make it, it's gone. And Kabbalah explains that there are certain angels who are like this. They're called the seraphim, the burning angels. And whenever it describes God making them, it uses always the present tense. God is making them active. So it explains that those angels, as soon as they are created, they desire to go back to their source, and they're gone. And then they're recreated and gone, and recreated and gone. Because they're so connected to their source at every moment that they can't exist apart from it. That's light. Vessels are the opposite. Vessels are, I am down here, separate from my source, and I don't feel my source. If you looked around and you say, hey, here's a cup, this cup is more like a vessel, also because it holds things, but also because it's physical. And if I look at it, I don't see the godliness that's created. I don't see God made this. So this doesn't look like light, as we would call it, because it's separate from its source. Vessels are most of the world around us in the physical sense. And in the world of Atzilus, they're the parts of the light, parts of the energy that do not feel directly connected. But the problem is, if you just have vessels, you don't have any divinity because they're separate from their source. So you're stuck. If I have light, I don't have a world because it wants to go back. If I have vessels, I don't have a God. So we put the light in the vessels. And that's what God does to create a world. Light in vessels. Light and vessels are opposites. And yet, somehow, God connects them. So, if we look at source, text 4a, I think. Short one. We'll move down the line over here. Can you read text 4a for us? Want to read text for us?
The light itself is in a state of simple abstraction. The vessel imposes a definition on the light in the form of particular attributes of wisdom, kindness, so.
Thank you. So, what the vessels, when you put light into vessels, it creates purpose and specificity in the light. It creates detail in the light. The energy of God is, it's unformed. It's like an atom. It just doesn't have anything specific to it. When we put it into a vessel, we combine those, we create a thing. So in Kabbalistic terms, in Atzilus, the light that comes from Ein Sof, from the infinite, doesn't have those details directly in it. It's white light. And we put it in a red cup and we get red. Light that's red. And so with either of those, you don't have a sephira. A sephira is a combination of the light and the vessel. A vessel without the light has no divine energy in it. It's kindness, but not divine kindness. Light without a vessel is not kindness, it's just divine. So that's how we combine the two together. But how do you combine the two? They're opposites. So imagine you had two children fighting on a playground, fighting over a toy. How do we resolve? How do we make them get along? Well, if you have a child and you're fighting over a toy, what do you tell them to do?
Stop fighting.
Stop fighting. Go to the teacher. Because the way that most fights end is with a powerful third party stepping in. You know, this is the Leviathan. Leviathan, you try to stop the fight by a third party stepping in and saying, I understand that you guys don't like each other, that you're in conflict, but your subservience to me is more powerful than your anger against each other. That's how you stop the fights. So that's kind of what happens. Light and vessels are naturally opposites. They don't fit together. The light says, I don't want to be in a vessel. A vessel? A vessel is going to prevent me from being undefined and godly. The vessel says, divine? What do I want divine for? I'm not divine. I'm separate from divine. I just want to be. God says, no, I want the light to go in the vessel. The vessel says, I don't want it. God says, I don't care. I don't care what you don't want. I'm putting you together anyways. And the bittul, the nullification of the light and the vessel, so God allows those two to be pushed together. Two opposite magnets that are pulling against each other, and you just crush them together. Light and vessel together. And they have to be constantly held together, because if they're not held together, they will separate. And so there's a constant overarching divine power holding them together at any time. So if you look at text 4c, we're going to basically show you the sources for that. 4c and 4d, both of them. You read text 4c for us?
Yes. Lights and vessels are inherently opposites. The lights, by their very nature, are abstract. They also aspire to return to their source and to become consumed in their sublime origin. By contrast, vessels have a divine nature. They desire to retain and are naturally sent to lower realms.
Yeah, it's basically what I said. So read 4d now and read the next source, and you'll see that also what I said.
They are entirely created God's intent creation, namely that the universe should become orderly, not left in chaos.
Exactly. So it's kind of like two people who are in love, and one of them says, I really want to go out and buy you flowers, but if I do that, I'll be leaving you, so I can't. That's kind of what the light feels like. I'm so connected at all times, I can't go and become a defined sphere of love or kindness. I can't do that because then I'm separating from the divinity. And God says, well, if you love me, you will do things for me. You don't get to decide what love for me looks like. I'm telling you what it is. And I'm telling you that for you, undefined light, it means to become defined. So when the light, and also the vessel feels that desire to submit to God's will, they will be able to overcome it. But what if they don't? What if they don't? What if they say, you know what? I love you too much to leave you. I feel so much of myself that I'm not going to be able to allow light within. So what happens when you press light and into vessels that both aren't ready for it? So here's where we have one of the first sentences in the Torah. I think it's the second sentence. The second sentence in the Torah is enigmatic. It says that God created the heaven and the earth. That's the first sentence. And the earth was tohu vavohu, dark and void, or something like that. Confusion, chaos. So what does that mean? It's a very hard sentence to actually translate literally. There are literal explanations, but without Kabbalah, this sentence is almost unreadable. What does it mean that the world was dark and confused? What world? I thought God hasn't created anything yet. So in Kabbalah, it gives a real explanation for what this sentence means. So if you go to text 5, see the sentence. Who's next in line? Want to read? Go for it.
In the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and earth, the earth was chaotic and desolate. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and God's spirit hovered over the water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Exactly. So the earth is chaotic and desolate. The earth that seemingly hasn't yet been created. And there's God's spirit hovering over the water that also hasn't specifically been created yet. And then there's light. So the Rashi and Ibn Ezra, all the classic commentators give explanations. The world, everything was created first and then put into place later, trying to fit it within the words. In Kabbalah, though, this is read as referring to a world that is not the one that we inhabit currently. It's referring to the creation of Atzilus, and it's not even referring to the creation of Atzilus that we currently connect to. It's referring to a version A of Atzilus. A version A of Atzilus where the light and the vessels did not get along. Where God said, here, I want you to create spheres. I want you to create chesed and gevura and tiferes, kindness, and it didn't work. The light and the vessels did not get along. And the earth was desolate and void referred to the result of that. The result of that is the vessels shatter and the light vanishes. The light and the vessels can't get along. Neither of them says, I'm subservient enough to God to do what he wants. Instead, they shatter. And we're left with unformed chaos everywhere. So, if you read text 6, this is called Shviras HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. Want to read text 6 for us?
The earth was chaotic and desolate. This referred to the breaking of the vessels. God's spirit hovered over the water. This referred to the light of the vessels failed.
Yeah. So, I just want to clarify here that I'm using a lot of human language when I'm describing this event, where the vessels want to do things and don't want to do things. In reality, they don't have free will in the sense that that you might imagine. So I'm really anthropomorphizing them pretty extremely. In reality, this is all part of God's plan, so it's not like they're rebelling against God in the sense, but just want to use that language to try to get across the idea. But the vessels and the light don't get along, and they create a world of chaos called a world of tohu. And those sparks of tohu, the energy of tohu, which was powerful, light so powerful that it couldn't fit into vessels, and vessels so powerful that they couldn't absorb the light, leave remnants into version 2. So in text 7, it gives the description, as I said, of what went wrong. Why did tohu not work out? You want to read text 7 for us?
7a.
7a, yes.
The lights of Tohu were intense and powerful. They intensely desired to be nullified and subsumed in their emanating source. They had no sense of what their source wanted of them. As a result, they failed to deviate from default nature for the sake of submitting the greater purpose.
Exactly. So they had too much ability of their own to say what God wanted. It's kind of like a guy who once wrote to me and asked the rabbi, he said, I want Shabbos to feel holy. I want it to feel like the holiest day. So for me, what really makes me feel holy is playing music and lighting a fire and meditating in front of it. And I said, well, that's possibly true, but you don't get to decide in the relationship what the other person wants. You have to ask them what they want. You don't get to determine the love language of your spouse. You just try to find it out. God said, hey, I want a day with you, and here's what I want. Yes, you're right. You do want it to be a holy day and a spiritual day, but within what God asked of you. So the lights of Tohu had that problem. And so we want to be connected to God, so much so that we're going to ignore what he wants of us. Caleb said, we're going to be so separate from God that we're going to ignore what he wants from us. And when that happens, nothing gets done. No real world is created. And the energy just gets scattered. But the energy isn't gone, as all energy is always conserved, never destroyed. So the energy remains. And our job is in some way to harness it. So we are going to skip the next source and move on. So God created a version 2. Version 2 was where God said, all right, now we're going to create or give light in vessels that are much, much more subservient, much, much more nullification. They feel God's purpose a lot more. And they will be easily connected, more easily connected. This is called the world of tikkun. Tikkun means rectification, fixing. It's fixing what was broken. After the world was created chaotic and desolate, God says, here's a new world where we can make it work this time. So you might have heard this term before, tikkun olam, fixing the world. In modern times, it's often used as a reference to ecological works or humanitarian efforts as we fix the world. In Kabbalistic terms, it means fixing the previous world, the world of tohu that was broken. And we do that by trying to find those sparks of tohu, the energy that did not make it into a vessel, and make it into a vessel. So what do we have that's connected to tohu, that has a spark of tohu within it? Tohu is powerful, so powerful that it didn't bend. What do we have that's so powerful that doesn't bend to God's will? The animal soul. The animal soul is sourced in tohu. Its original source comes from that world. The lights that didn't make into a vessel were taken from that world and used as the basis for the animal soul in the person. So the question is, why is the animal soul stronger than the godly soul? It's not like one is more divine than the other. One is more subservient to God than the other. The animal soul, though, is the light of tohu inside of us. And our job is to say, okay, last time it didn't work out. You were too focused on yourself, on being you. And this time we need to create more definition in the light. We need to say, there's something bigger than you this time also. And it's more powerful because there was more energy there. There was more power in tohu in the first place. So we need to harness that. So if you look in text, I can't even, someone wrote it, text 8. Can you read text 8 for us?
Sure. The chaotic soul. We are comprised of both tohu and tikkun. Our godly souls are products of tikkun and are therefore inherently subservient to God. Our animal souls and bodies are products of the broken vessels of tohu. Although inanimate objects, plants, and animals are also linked with tohu, the concept of separation from God is far more pronounced in humans. That's because all other things cannot sin, and therefore do not become completely separated from God. Humans, by contrast, on account of our bodies and animal souls, are capable of sin, and consequently of becoming far more separated from God.
So these are our two souls, tohu and tikkun inside of ourselves. And our job is to make it work where it didn't work before. God said, the light in the vessels wasn't good enough last time. I'm going to give you a vessel that's more powerful. The ability to control even the animal that didn't listen last time. And that's part of the reason why it shows up first. Just like in the original world, tohu was created first and then broke. So in our personal lives, in ourselves, tohu shows up first. The animal is put in first. And then slowly we manifest the godly soul to try to tame it. It's not wrong, but it's a little bit broken to start with. The lack of ability to think larger than ourselves is, being out of sync with godliness. In some sense, the child who thinks only about themselves is not in tune with who they should really be, their godly soul. They're not in tune with the sense that there's something larger. They're blinded. And then we slowly we remove the blinders and show them what's really going on, that we are all connected to something greater. That who we really are is more than just our hands, our senses. This is a window to ourselves, but not ourselves. So that is why light is more powerful. And that's why with just a godly soul, we wouldn't be able to accomplish the same amount. So the same question that we had before, which is why did this even happen in the first place? God, of course, knew that the light and the vessels wouldn't get along. He knew it would break apart. He knew that it wouldn't work. So it didn't mess up. It wasn't a mistake. So why have it happen in the first place? Because by doing that, by creating something broken, he gives us something to fix. There's a larger question, which is why create anything in the first place? What does God need? What does God need? So in Kabbalah, they do a simple calculation. They say, okay, so imagine that you walked into a room and you see that someone ransacked the place looking for something. They're searching for something. How can you tell if they found it? Simple logic puzzle, we get it. How can you tell if they found it? You could see how much of the room they looked through. If they looked everywhere, they probably didn't find it. If they looked in half the places, they probably found it. Which means that in terms of creation, the last place that's created has to be the goal. If this world, the lowest world, wasn't the ultimate objective, it wouldn't have been created. We would have stopped at the angels. We would have stopped earlier. So it must be that here in this world is where the real divine intention stands. And that intention is saying that here's a person with the ability to sin, with free will, and here's a mission for them to accomplish. To put it another way, what is the only thing that an infinite God does not have logically? A nation that chooses them. Because it's all you. The only way to have a nation is to have something outside of you that chooses you. Now, of course, even that logic process is something that God created. But in concept, Kabbalah explains it as with the analogy of a king who sees a talking bird. And the talking bird is what they like. It doesn't talk as well as humans, but it's a talking bird. It's much cooler. So are we as powerful as the angels, as godly as the angels, as holy as the angels? Of course not. But we choose our holiness. And that choice is what makes it valuable. That's why an angel is not where it's at. The angels want to be human. In Hayom Yom it says that I think it was the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe who said that the highest angel would give up anything, all of his power to be able to do one mitzvah. Because for the angel, it's not choice. And so its value is not really there. But for a human, the smallest good deed is infinitely more valuable because it's a choice of something that doesn't feel God. It's a tohu being trying to put it into a vessel of tikkun. So with that in mind, who is the world created for? The godly soul or the animal soul? So if we look in text 9, we'll answer that question. You're up. Want to read text 9 for us?
All of the mitzvah are designed exclusively to purify the animal soul and mortal body. By contrast, the divine soul does not require rectification. It has no intrinsic need to become installed within the animal soul and mortal body. The sole purpose for doing so is to illuminate and rectify them. Understand this well. The reason the soul descends to this world is to rectify it.
We are intrinsically holy. And that holiness, the holiness of the godly soul, is so powerful that nothing can really taint it. When we leave the world, our godly soul comes out the way it came in. Godly, divine. And so the question asked of the godly soul is, why go in the first place? If you are perfect already, why even try? What is there to gain? The answer is the godly soul is not really the purpose. The purpose is for the animal soul. So there's certain individuals that are animal soulless. We call them tzaddikim, the righteous people, people who aren't born with that same animal part of them. And for that reason, they don't have the drive to sin. They don't wake up in the morning and feel themselves. They just feel the mission. And we look up to that, reasonably so. They're righteous, they're holy, but they're also not the purpose. The purpose wasn't to create righteous people. The purpose was to create conflicted people, 3D characters. The righteous are flat characters, and they're important and they have a purpose. But they're not the main purpose of creation. So when we have these struggles, when you feel that all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I really feel a desire to sin. That's a gift. It's a gift that no one else in the whole Seder Shtalshalos, no one else in all of existence has. It's hard to view it that way sometimes. But the desire to sin is something that an angel would die for. Not to actually sin, but the desire to sin. Desire to overcome. There was once a man who came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it was by dollars, so he had only a few seconds. It was one of these, you walk by, the Rebbe would hand you $1 and move on. And so he said, I'm coming to you because I'm planning on marrying someone not Jewish. And my rabbi said I have to come and speak to you. I'm just letting you know, tell me what you want. See if you can convince me out of it. And he had done this before with a few different rabbis. And the results had usually been fire and brimstone, How awful, you're ending the line, dropping the torch. And the Rebbe looked at him and said, wow, I'm really jealous. So you're jealous? What are you jealous of? The Rebbe said, well, I was never ever was I ever given such a challenge. I was never tempted in such a way. I couldn't overcome that because I was never given it. You could. And that's something to be, pretty proud of. God gives us tests that we can handle. I wasn't given it because I'm the two-dimensional character here. You're the three-dimensional character. You're the person who has the choice to do that or not. So it's hard to view that, as a gift that we never look at, we never use. But it's the gift to overcome it. The animal soul that we always get to tame. So there's when every single mitzvah, when you're davening, anything we're doing, the goal is to tame the animal, not just to be holy, but to make the animal part of ourselves holy. Why did Hashem make the mitzvah this way? The goal of every detail of that mitzvah is to try to talk to the animal soul. Say, how do we get you involved? How are you part of the picture? So there's a story here of Rabbi Gershon Ber of Bahar. I'm just going to read it so he was a very, very holy man, righteous man, and he would always pray in Yiddish. He would often repeat words in Yiddish. He would say the davening in Hebrew, and then he'd repeat it in Yiddish immediately. Even in places where you're usually not allowed to talk, he would just always say it in Yiddish. And everyone knew he's a very holy man. He's a very scholarly man. He knows the translation. Why are you saying it in Yiddish? He said, my animal soul understands it better in Yiddish. Yiddish is the language I grew up with. That's the language that the animal soul speaks more commonly. And it's an important thing to remember. You have a siddur all the time. Sometimes the language of the siddur is not the language of your animal soul. Whoever did the translation put it a little stilted sometimes. Oh Lord, thou art, doesn't really hit the animal soul so well. And sometimes our job is to translate it and to put it into words that our animal soul connects to, and to pray not just to God, but to God with our animal soul. And to say, I'm happy that I had this food today. Happy that I, feel good today. Those aren't things that the godly soul is specifically worried about, but it is things that the animal soul is. And so if the animal soul feels like, you know why I'm healthy today? Because God made me healthy. Well, then all of a sudden the animal soul starts thinking, wait a second, so doing what God wants seems to be a good idea, because that's part of what I want too. So every mitzvah that we do should have that in mind. We should be thinking, how did we get the animal soul on board with what's going on here? And sometimes that can be the trick form, which is we put out the bagels and then we do the mitzvah while we're there. We do this with children all the time. Why do we throw candy at a bar mitzvah boy? Why do we have a 3-year-old lick honey from the letters at their 3-year-old birthday party, their upshanish? It's because we're doing, I think it's Pavlov, when you ring the bell by the dog, by the food, and eventually the bell starts making them salivate, is that we create a connection to the animal soul. We say, hey, this stuff is connected to that stuff. This and that are both good. And then the animal soul says, okay, I get it. The same way I like eating is the same way I like learning. Eventually, we stop throwing the candy, and hopefully they still show up. And that's the goal. So we're going to read text 11 now.
Once asked Rabbi corrects the Rabbi never later heard about whether it was permissible to translate every prayer into English. Versus Rabbi corrects asked, why would you want to keep that? I am so understood.
Yeah. So you want to read the next text, text 11?
Do not assume that the only time we are close to God while we are engaged in Torah study, prayer, and the performance of a mitzvah, and that we have turned away from God while engaged in earthly endeavors such as eating, drinking, other needs. This is not the case, for we are instructed, know God in all of your ways. We can connect with God through every endeavor.
Another essential Hasidic idea is that there isn't a distinction between holy and mundane in our activities. There's some people who say, I walk into the synagogue and that's the holy location. I walk out of it and that's the rest of my life. In Hasidus, all of life is one. Everything should be part of that same mission, which is rectify the tohu, bring godliness into the world. And every part of our lives can be part of that same mission. Anything. You have a job? Well, jobs aren't inherently unholy. They're just jobs. And if you're doing them for the right reason, bringing the right passion to them, that is also holy. And so it's not like we are only working on our animal soul when we are davening, when we're praying, when we're doing mitzvahs. Every part of our lives can be part of that. And so even the eating and the sleeping is also part of that. There's a day in the week where eating is a mitzvah. It's Shabbat. It's part of the pleasure of Shabbat is to actually enjoy it. And so anything you do to enjoy Shabbos is you're having in mind, I'm doing this for the sake of Shabbat. It's a holy action. So eating can be holy in and of itself. But what if I'm eating, again, to use the energy positive? And again, the eating itself is part of the mitzvah. When you're driving from your house to here to learn, the driving is also part of the mitzvah. All the preparations are steps in that. So our whole lives are revolving around it. We're supposed to live, the week revolves around Shabbos. The days before lead up to it, the days after lead away from it. But the center point of our life is that holiness. And then everything else we do just revolves around that, orbiting around that central point that we are doing what God wants, bringing the world to its godliness. And when we have that mindset, there is no separation. There isn't a holy part of our lives and an unholy part of our lives. It's just all one. It's all godliness. And so then the animal soul, everything is part of godliness. What can the animal soul do that's not part of a mitzvah? Nothing. So then the animal soul is automatically part of what's going on. Can't not be. There's nothing else to do. Okay. So as we said earlier, the passion and the power of the animal soul is higher than the godly soul. And so we are constantly struggling to make our connection to God that. Make a connection to God to say, I live through my connection. I survive through it. And the love for God that can be created through the animal soul is significantly higher than the one that can be created through just the godly soul, which is hard to imagine because the godly soul is always connected, but it's connected in a way that almost makes it not exist. It's connected in a way that it doesn't have a separate being that's moving towards God. The animal soul says, I am here and I love God, and therefore I'm bridging the gap. So that's our primary goal. So a quick side point, which is you guys might go to synagogue. You might go and sit there, and there's a prayer book in front of you, and there's Hebrew and English in it. What should you pray in, Hebrew or English? It's a good question, right? A lot of us struggle to learn Hebrew, break our teeth over the words, spend a lot of time on it. And that's important because the Hebrew words are specifically chosen. They're very holy. And if you can get a siddur with commentaries, it's this big. Every letter is specific, and there's deeper meanings everywhere. But half of prayer is talking to the animal soul, not just to God. And if we're using a language we don't understand, or even words that we don't resonate with, then half of prayer is lost. Half of prayer is lost. I spent a year praying in English. I was already, raised with the words, so I knew the words pretty well. And I even knew the translations, but I just wanted to say it in my own words for a period of time. Because otherwise, it's missing half of it. It's missing the resonance. So I would encourage you, if you go to synagogue, spend at least some of the time when you're there using your own words, using the words the animal soul can connect with. You'll see it's a very different prayer system. It's very different. Okay, so there's a story of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe had a chassid who was very, very troubled. He had a son who was going off the path. He was trying to become more worldly and separate from his Jewish roots. And his father, tried to get him to come back. It wasn't working. So the Alter Rebbe said, can you get us a meeting? I'll try to connect with him. So talk to him, All right, he agreed to a meeting. Specific day, specific time, we'll meet you in the town. So the Alter Rebbe was waiting in the town center. And he's a cloud of dust. And in comes the young man riding on a horse. Riding into town very, very fast. Kicking up dust everywhere. A little bit showing off, his riding abilities. Stops, dismounts. Rebbe says, what do you think of my horse? Alter Rebbe says, it's a nice horse. Why do you ride it? Why do I ride it? The horse is big and powerful and fast. It's very fast. It's faster than me, faster than you. Alter Rebbe says, yeah, but if you're going the wrong direction, then you're going the wrong direction faster. He's like, you're right. He says, when you'll realize, you realize. This boy says, what do you mean? He says, when you realize, you'll realize. He asks again, what do you mean? He says, when you'll realize, you'll realize. And eventually, he repeated enough that the boy broke down and realized he is riding the horse the wrong way. So the animal soul is a little bit like that horse. It's powerful. It's very powerful. When you ride it the right way, it creates more good possibilities than the godly soul by itself. When it's going the wrong way, the opposite is also true. The selfishness of the animal soul can do much more harm than anything else. We see it all around us. Untamed animal souls, people who put themselves over everything else. But we have a godly soul, which can tame it. And so we need to remember, always, those two are within us, and we need to figure out which one. Which one is going to be in charge today. So, in our history, as we probably know, Kabbalah is like a Mandelbrot set. You know what that is? Fractals. If you zoom in, you'll see the pattern again. And you zoom in, you'll see the pattern again. Zoom in, you see the pattern again. You might have seen this already over the course of your classes. Every single dichotomy is found everywhere. If I zoomed into just the light, you'd find the same two patterns. And if you zoomed into one of those, you'd find the same two patterns. Everywhere you go, the patterns are always there. And so we're going to look at somewhere else where this same pattern emerges, which is the story of Yitzchak of Yaakov and Esau, twins. Twins that are the opposites. Might be able to tell where this is going. They each represent one of the two, Tohu and Tikkun. Esau is the hunter, the wild man out in the fields. And Yaakov is in the tents working. And quick refresher of the story. So these two children, when Rivka was pregnant with them, she went to Shem and Ava. She went and she said, "What's going on? I'm having real difficulties in my pregnancy. There's a lot of kicking going on. There's some battles inside." And he said, "Well, it's because your two children inside are opposites, and they're battling inside. And when they come out, the same is going to happen. It's going to continue the battle. Sibling rivalry will go on. And one will have dominance over the other, and the other one will have dominance over that. And that's the constant back and forth." So that's exactly what happened. They were born, and from birth, they were opposites. Each was pulled a different direction. And Esav became the man of the fields. Yaakov became the man of the tent, sitting and learning. And towards the end of Yitzchak's life, he tried to give a blessing to Esau. He tried to say, "I'm going to give you all these things." And then along came Yaakov and stole the blessings. Dressed up, pretended to be Esau, came in, got the blessings. And Esau and Yaakov, were very upset about each other. Yaakov had to flee for years until finally they made up again at the end of their lives, towards the end of their lives. So a few things are interesting in this story. One thing is that Yitzchak wants to give the blessing to Esau. Why? Why? He knows his sons. He knows his sons. In fact, there's, midrashic mentions of him telling his son specifically, "I want you to prepare food for me, and I don't want you to steal it." He knew what kind of son he had. So why is he trying to give him a blessing? So in Kabbalah, it explains that Esav was Tohu, and Yitzchak was Tikkun. Esav was that chaotic power, and Yaakov was controlled, and also less powerful. So Yitzchak said, "I have these blessings. If I give them to Yaakov, then they are given to the less powerful option. Less good can happen. If I give it to Esav, there's a possibility, a chance that I will fix it. And then I'll have a much more powerful holy force going on. Esav will be much more of a good force than Yaakov could be, because he's from Tohu and Yaakov is Tikkun." But it was a little short-sighted. Because, again, if you push the beast in the wrong direction, it goes faster in that direction. And so he was hopeful, as any parent would be, that if I give him the blessings, maybe it will work out. But his wife knew better. She said that he's not ready. He's not there yet. He's not there yet. You give him more light now, it's just going to break the vessels again. We need to use the Tikkun force to tame him later. So she snuck in Yaakov and she said, "You go in, get the blessings, and in the future, you will, get along with him." 22 years later, he comes back and they have a reunion. Esav, according to at least one interpretation, forgives Yaakov for stealing the blessings, and they get along. And then at the end of it, it says Esav says to Yaakov and says, "Where are you traveling to? Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to Seir. Meet you there." Esav's like, "I'll walk with you. It's fine. We'll go together." He's like, "Nah, it's okay. We're slow. We can't go so fast. You don't want to wait for us. We'll meet you there." And off goes Esav, and Yaakov never goes to Seir. He told him where he was going and didn't go there. So, of course, on the literal level, he was just scared of him. He's like, we had a short period of time where he was okay with me, but in the future it might not work out. So, well, count my lucky stars while I have them and not tempt fate any longer. But in Kabbalah and Chassidus explains that he looked at Esav and he said, "Is this the time? Is this the moment where I could fix it? Where I could fix Tohu? I've got the power of Tikkun. He's got the power of Tohu. Is this the moment?" He looked. He said, "No, it's not here yet. It's not here yet. So wait until I make it to Har Seir, Mount Seir." What is Mount Seir? So I think it's Zechariah, it says that in the future, the Messiah will go to Mount Seir and there judge the nations. He was saying, I'm not there yet. In Mashiach comes, we will be able to fix it, but not yet. And so we, in a sense, this Tohu and Tikkun battle is the same battle as bringing Mashiach to the world, as trying to fix the world as a whole. Broken, and we fix it. And so Mashiach comes, we again reunify Tohu and Tikkun overall. So each of us does our personal Tohu and Tikkun transformation. Individually, we bring Mashiach to ourselves. We create a world where our animal is working for the right cause. We're plowing all the fields. And if every individual does that, then all together we create a larger, grander, worldwide rectification. That's the class. Any questions? Yes?
Is that Mount Hermon? Is that the one?
So it's not that one. Here's the problem. Basically, any biblical site is just guesswork to find it. Almost anyone. It does not feel like Mount Hermon because Mount Hermon, I think, is in the north. And Mount Seir is usually viewed as more actually across the Jordan, in current day Jordan, somewhere in south of Jordan. But where specifically is kind of anyone's guess.
Definitely not.
No, different mountain. It's a different one. Even Mount Sinai, I wouldn't even know where it is. It's a lot of guesswork going on.
All right, I'm going to go.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend.
All right. We will see you next week. Class 5.
All right, and then I'll meet you out here.
Okay. Okay.
All right.